Hi everyone, my name is Renee Stops and I am one of the sales directors for the AUNZ Microsoft advertising business. It's really great to be here today. I'd first like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we are today and pay respects to our elders past, present and emerging. The workday consumer has arrived. Our time and our days have completely changed in the way we go to work. It's not 9 to 5 anymore. And Forrester Consulting have actually just released some really amazing research on this that we can share later. I'll post it up on LinkedIn for everyone to download. And it's just about how we can blend our lives together and how we really make hybrid work for us. So some of the stats which I'll just share with you, which is actually going to pave the conversation that we're going to talk through today, is around, over 60% of us are really regularly doing personal tasks such as research and making purchases during our work time. And we are spending a lot more time on our PC devices as well. And out of that, 1 of 3 of us are spending 1 to 3 hours a day on personal tasks. So there really is no more 9 to 5 separation. In Australia, actually, these stats are greater, so we like to do things that we probably shouldn't be doing in work time, but that's okay. Nearly 40% of us, we spend more than 1 hour on personal tasks, and 63% of us are actually using our PC to do these personal tasks. So our workday has definitely changed, and the conversation that we will be chatting through today is how, as we put this horrible pandemic behind us and we actually get to go and attend these amazing events in person for the first time in 2.5 years, we are now faced with how can we really balance our personal and professional lives effectively and to the best of our abilities. So how do we make hybrid work work? Please welcome Jason Tonelli, CEO of Razorfish and Performix, and Mitch Wallace, the founder and CEO of Wear Heart on My Sleeve. I'm going to put this away. I don't think we have a hold slide, which is a bit... No, we don't. So I'll just put that there. It's a bit weird just seeing yourself on TV. So I'd like to start with you, Jason, if I can. And, you and I have worked together for, 6-7 years now. And I know how, personally you are really passionate about mental health and you bring that into your day-to-day, as the CEO of now Razorfish, Performix, you work at Publicist Community. How are you really embracing this hybrid work that we are really trying to bring into our days?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. Thanks for having me, everyone. I think it's a big question. I think pre-pandemic, if we're still allowed to talk about that, Publicist put in place something called Liberté, which was, we spent a lot of time, about a year, trying to develop how we think about people's flexibility around work. And what we worked out is if you go rules-based, people don't like that. It's kind of this reverse mentality. Give them a rule, they'll break them. And so what we did was we developed 6 or 7 behaviours around what we expect from managers in flexible work, as well as from the team. And that started us on a year-long journey pre-pandemic. So when the team, all of us and Mike included, decided on March 19th to go, we're going home, and we thought it was going to be 2 weeks, and it turned into 2 years, and we were moving office that weekend. It was quite an interesting way that we had a little bit of muscle memory. I don't think we're perfect. Fast forward 2.5 years later, all the lockdowns, and I'm a Melburnian, so don't worry about the cold. It's a lot colder down south. But you start to look at flexible work, and I was just saying to Mitch before, I was a big advocate for what's a 4-day work week look like. How do we get 38 hours done in 30? How do we get more efficient so people can have Friday off or a Monday off? I now today have changed my view on that because I think when you look at those stats, why can't you have 2 hours? Like for me, I get to drop off one of my kids at school and I'm the president of our kindergarten, so I can go and do a morning in the kinder and not be judged as the CEO and set that example for people. I think that's where we've got to be, and I really embrace it. We'll talk later, but getting people back in the office is just as important in terms of connection and community, but having flexibility and that without judgment, I think that's really key. is a wonderful thing, I think, for all of our people as well as us as an agency.
Yeah. You probably should talk to Elon Musk. I just heard from the Channel 10 guys that he put out a post or something this morning about if you're an executive that works for him, you have to be in the office 40 hours a week. No exceptions. So I don't know how that's going to go with staff turnover in the next, 24 hours. Not well. Mitch, thank you so much for joining our conversation today. I know this topic is, very personal to you, and I'm really grateful for giving us your time. So with the line of work that you do, how are you seeing some of the impacts on, mental health and society as we try to make this new world work for us?
I don't think we gave enough airtime to the mental health impact of the pandemic. I mean, every single person in this room can say in one way or another that they were impacted. And the neuroscience as to why that is, I'll try and explain it in under 30 seconds, but essentially the brain doesn't care if you're happy, unfortunately. It's a risk mitigation device. So its job is to keep you safe. And that's why people go to jobs that they hate and stay in relationships that are toxic, because at least they're deemed as familiar. So the brain sees that as more safe because it's a known quantity. So hence the don't care if you're happy. In fact, it takes 5 positive emotions to outweigh 1 negative emotion. That's why when you sit in a performance review with your boss and they spend 59 minutes out of the 60 telling you that you're awesome, you're going to be the next CEO, and then in the last 60 seconds they're like, oh, hey, just don't be late to meetings in future, I've noticed that. You leave the door and you're like, fuck, I'm getting fired tomorrow. Because we just will overindulge in the negative. Why? Because the brain is a risk mitigation device. If its job is to see all the things, it needs to see really loudly everything that can go wrong. And it doesn't really care what can go right. That's why the positives are quiet. We need to genuinely manufacture gratitude and stuff like that, because it doesn't come naturally to the brain. So the reason why I say that context is because if you're employed to be a risk mitigator, what's the number one thing you're going to need in order to do your job effectively? Certainty. Certainty is the bedrock for forecasting, implementing, and managing risk. So what the pandemic did was essentially give us strip the brain of its number one drug addiction to certainty, and then that caused the hardwiring to go haywire. And we saw a lot of people who were experiencing mental illness spike, and we saw a lot of net new people who had always looked at the mental health spaces like them and us go, oh shit, this is one big equalizer here, and start to question their own sense of self. So it's really natural, I guess my point is that if you were impacted over the last couple of years, and maybe still are, that's because at a neurobiological level, your chemistry was challenged to do what it needed to do to serve its highest purpose.
Yeah, it's super interesting the way that the brain, really works. And I think, most of us here have spent so many hours sitting behind a screen, and technology has just been the core of our life the past 2.5, nearly going into 3 years now. Jason, I just wanted to highlight and say congratulations once again to you and your team for the amazing work that you put out with the research partnership with a psychologist around Project Blind Spot. For those of people in the room who haven't heard about Project Blind Spot, it's a bit of a mouthful actually. Can you share a little bit about that project?
Yeah, and we did it in conjunction with Microsoft. So look, some of the creative team came up to us, it was a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, and said, we think there's a theory around people not noticing mental health signs. There's a lot of signs that happen in these backgrounds or people's lives that we're missing. Can we test it? And we did. So we got 84 participants out of over 180 hours of Teams calls to see, and tested basically if people could pick up. We manufactured backgrounds. So basically we took a photo of your normal background, i.e. your house or kitchen that everyone saw, or bedroom, and over a couple of weeks before the test we photoshopped those backgrounds. So we added, if you're in your bedroom, a couple of clothes for day one on the bed, and then the bed wasn't made on day 2, and maybe there was a bottle of wine on the bedside table on day 3. And we wanted to test if anyone picked up these pretty clear cues that maybe something's not okay. And out of 184 hours, not one person picked it up. So we've been looking at this person for 18 months already on a screen, and then for 1 week, we made some really evident changes, and no one said, "Are you okay?" And for us, that was really alarming. So we started to think about how do we do that. So we created, working with Sabina and the team, some ways that and launched a site around how do we start to address when we see that? How do you have the conversation just to say, "Are you okay? Are you good?" Now, this was not a campaign for a customer. This was our team just sitting there going, "We want to make a difference in the world," that little dent in the universe, we call it. And we tried. And it got out there, and we got heaps of hits and lots of support from people like Microsoft and a couple of the networks who picked it up. But it was a beautiful way to understand that even though we're looking at something different, that we're not equipped as people to have the conversation. And I think that's the biggest learning as a leader I've had, which is equipping my whole team on just seeing if someone's okay. Because I was saying to Mitch before, you couldn't do what you normally do.
Yeah.
You couldn't go, "I can see you're not okay. Let's go for a walk and grab a coffee." Like, I'm in Melbourne, you're in Bondi. That's really difficult right now to get to you. So what are the other skills I have to learn as a leader to help you through this? And what can we put around you as a team to help?
Yeah. And it goes back to what the lady over there, I don't know your name, sorry, who mentioned in the last panel around trying to make a difference, not just because, it's Are You OK Day or, it's Mental Health Awareness Week and Mental Health Awareness Month. They've really got to think about, how can we make a difference to those around us every single day that we are kind of engaging. So, technology is the core to where how we've worked and what we've done in the last, 2.5 years. And I think, creating focus time to actually work and get off Teams meetings. Some of us are probably on virtual meetings, 8 hours a day, and it just gets so draining, so it's really important, to create that focus time. If you are a Microsoft Teams user, this isn't actually a plug, it's actually definitely a resource that I highly recommend you use. Viva Insights will actually block out focus time for you in your calendar, which is really great. I use it all the time. I know many of the team use it too, and you can actually sit there, focus on work, get off that Teams meeting or get out of meetings or go for a walk. It is actually also integrated into Headspace too, so you can create those mini micro meditation moments if that's something that you really want to do as well, which is fantastic. So I think virtual burnout is. I'm definitely feeling it. Microsoft is a global organisation. Sometimes we can be on meetings at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and it does get really tiring. In your industry, in your line of work, Mitch, how are you seeing the effects of technology burning people out?
Well, in complete transparency, before I got my master's degree in clinical psychology, and for those that don't know my story, I've struggled with mental illness for 25 years. I'm now 32. I was first diagnosed at 7 years old with OCD. And I worked for Microsoft for 7 years, straight out of university, intern, grad, then ended up being a global product manager in Seattle before having a mental breakdown, quitting master's degree in psychology, rebuilding, starting a charity, went viral, and now full-time in mental health. That's like the 30-second version of a very fucking long life of like highs and lows. But so I have a soft spot for technology for sure. And just like when I get asked about, what's the impacts of social media, I think it's a very powerful thing. It's a weapon. And a weapon isn't necessarily good or bad in and of itself. Like a knife is used to cut food and provide for your family. It's also something that you can kill someone with. Technology is the same. How you use it will dictate its evilness or angelicness. And work is now, this is an old saying, work is a thing you do, not a place you go. And technology made that true. And it's on us now to use technology correctly to get the best out of it and mitigate its offshoots. And I think the introversion-extroversion equation isn't talked about enough during the pandemic also, which is that there's a bunch of people over the last few years where lockdown has been heaven. I would kind of put myself in that category. I'm an enormous introvert. And by the way, the definition is an introvert recharges alone, an extrovert recharges around people. So this has not been good for extroverts. In fact, it's the worst thing you can possibly have as an extrovert. So technology has been your gateway to energy regulation over the last couple of years. And so we have to get into a mindset when everything gets taken away from us and we don't feel like we can control anything, and this is a big realization we've had over the last couple of years, there's a lot we cannot control. So our primary focus always must be in life, how do we respond well to it? And so our ability to not go, oh, I can't see anyone, well, I might as well just shut myself down from the world and withdraw as an extrovert. No, well, how do I get the best out of this? I might not get 100%, but how do I use technology to connect and get the 20% that's going to keep me going until this subsides and brings me back into the world?
Yeah, so it's such a powerful statement. You know, it can be great and it can be detrimental to all of us. You know, with the research that I shared before, just around how we are using technology, you know, differently. We still use it. You know, previously we were commuting, some of us a long time, that was me, lots of hours in my day where I'd sit on my mobile phone and I'd, you know, do research and make purchases, whereas now I sit at the dining room table, read the news on my PC, have a coffee, scream at the kids to get ready for school, we're going to be late. So my whole life has definitely changed. You know, with more of us doing more personal tasks during work hours, Jason, I'd really love to understand, you know, how are you getting your agencies to adapt to this? And then also, how are you educating brands out there when they're thinking about doing their planning for, you know, media or advertising buy?
Yeah, I think we're all human. It's really simple, right? And we're all going through this together. I think there's been, you can look at the negatives of the pandemic and you can look at the positives, and you've got to look for those positives on how things have adapted and evolved. For me, I'll answer the second part of your question around how do you help your team? It's through example. Like, there's nothing worse than going, oh, you can be fully flexible and then be the CEO who's at their desk from 8:30 to 5:30 every day. I'll be really honest. Because there's a pressure you all would feel if that was your boss, right? That I need to be there too. I need to be visible, right? And so you need to set that example, and you've got to lead that example and talk about those examples. The fact that I do things, right? And it's funny you talk about energy, and somebody that I speak to around energy talks about you've got to think about what you do as your job, right? But then you've got to have your side hustle, right? And you should have a soul hustle. And for me, I know what those things are. I kind of work at Publicis. That's great, right? I have a startup that I work on, or a couple, and that I'm a director of, and I'm the president of a kindergarten, right? And I get energy through that, but that means that my life has a lot going on. I talk about those things to my team. I'm not ashamed that at 3:30 on Tuesday this week, I did a Teams call with the lead educator at the kindergarten to work out how her week's going, right? And I'll tell my team about it, right? I'll tell my boss about it, and it's okay, right? And I think that's what people are starting to grapple with, which is, it's okay to do some online shopping while you're grabbing a coffee and maybe talking to somebody, right? And that's normal now, and it's acceptable now, and no one's going to tell you off now. But as leaders, you've got to be able to set that tone and example. Advertisers are different, right? And I think the advertising community has been great in terms of customers and all that, but it comes back to the conversation that Paramount were having before too, which is that bravery. I was talking to them in the break around bravery to do the work. Like, the work, the 10's done, and the stance you've taken, that's hard. It's not easy. It's brave. And marketers, CEOs and boards need to get brave, and they're starting to get brave around the work they're producing to do this. They're nowhere near good enough, but I think they're starting to push the boat out on ideas.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's definitely, we're at a place where we have to find that blend and, you know, what's going to work for us personally, anyone who works with me knows that my day is like, it's a scatter field. Like it's in my calendar. If it's not in my calendar, it didn't happen and I don't have time to do it. Like I don't have time because I have 2 very young kids. I think I put this whole thing together. My day from 9 to 5 doesn't exist. I spend 5 hours of a night time in the freezing cold at soccer training during the week, and that's where I do most of my thinking and most of my work. That's where I get it done in the car. So I think it's really trying to find that blend of what really works for not just me, it's got to work for my team. You have to set those boundaries and you have to be really clear and set that example so that they know, I leave very similarly at 3:30. I leave to go get my kids from school and do the 100 activities that they've got, in the afternoon. So I think clear is kind, to what we were talking about before. Brené Brown saying clear is kind, and also, but just don't be kind to others, be kind to yourself, because I think you're in control of your day and you're in control of, what you do. So Mitch, I'm going to turn to you. How do we create that? Tips from you, how do we create that healthy balance? To your point before, work isn't somewhere you go, it's something we do.
Yeah. Has anyone heard of the concept of the third space? Yeah, cool. So I did a campaign with Allianz, and the guy who wrote that book, I don't know if he's here, awkward if he is. I never actually got to meet him, so he could be staring at me. I'm not claiming your work if you are here. So what we're doing now, what we're about to do, so what we're doing now, first space, what we're about to do, second space, the transition time between the two is the third space. And it was interesting is I was on a call with a very high-level exec client earlier this week, and he was saying how he would work in his bedroom and then go straight into the kitchen, and his wife and 2 daughters were standing there, and they would cop the kind of build up of the day because there was no transition time to move between. So in the absence of then going, well, everything's doomed, which is not an empowered mindset, and we're working on responding well to life because we can't always control it, we manufacture a third space. So what routines, what behaviors, what rituals can we put in place to signal to the brain, hey, we're about to shift context and we need to pull some steam out of this right now. Whether that be, exercise, showering, meditating, yogaing, something, but focusing on our sphere of control and manufacturing as much bottoms up practices, the better. And my last tip would be, challenge your thoughts always and often. Do not take them for gospel. As I said, the brain will tell you something that's familiar and something that is easier to make sense of a situation, not necessarily something that's true. So, it likes to catastrophize. In fact, it's built to think in all or nothing because it's more certain. So, in moments where you go, oh shit, I need to go over here or go over here in order to seek control, just pause for a second and say, is this really true, or is my body just forcing me into a situation where it wants an outcome of certainty that doesn't actually need to be there? For example, things will never change, nothing's going to go back to normal. These are very big, bold statements that are actually bullshit. And so find the little things that we can get every single day. We're here now, we're in a room, and we're talking about how bad was lockdown. I cannot tell you on how many keynotes I was asked by clients to do to help people have tips through lockdown. And I was like, I can do that, but my main message was this too shall pass. I can give you tips, but I know this feels all-encompassing right now. This will pass. And you will be cheersing a beer to your friend going, how bad was lockdown? Way sooner than you think. So your mind, no matter how good your practices are, your mindset will be very, very, very key. So constantly challenge your thoughts.
Can I add one?
Yeah. No.
Who's a people manager in here? Who has at least one person? Raise your hand. Right. I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial. There's this little feature in your email called Send Later. Right? I, for the life of me, cannot stand those little, and you're going to kill me for this, messages saying, I like to work flexibly. Because Renee's got it.
I took it off.
because it's a little bit of a fuck you, right? Like I'm sending it but to clear it off my desk and I don't want you to read it while I'm reading it, but it's in my inbox and my phone just bleeped and you're my boss, so I'm going to go do that anyway, even though you've told me in your between the 15 messages below your signature not to read it, right? And it got lost between an acknowledgement of country and Pride Week and everything, right? It's true. You send later. Think about your people, right? And yes, it's okay for you to send the email like I did at 1 a.m. this morning, but they don't have to get it. They can get it at 9, and that's okay, right? And if you really want to be fancy, stagger them too and think about them. Like, don't send 15 to go at 9.
Right? It's very complicated.
But right, it's really easy. Actually, Microsoft's got so good at it that you can actually hit send later and it sets it for 9 a.m. the next day when you just click the button. So literally it's one button. Like, use it, please, because that little bit of text actually does the opposite to what you intended to do as the sender, and people still read it. So I just want to put my tip out there to help your teams.
Good tip. I did take that off my end of email.
I just remembered as I was saying it that you had it.
No, I took it off because someone sent me an email and I saw it at the bottom and it gave me the shits, to be honest. I was just like, why do you need to put that? So I took it off straight away. Just want to touch really quickly on connection, and you mentioned it before, Mitch, just around creating that third space of, when we're at home and we go finish a day and we go straight out to family. I know my family has definitely copped it more than once. So how do you see the importance, I know you touched on it very briefly before, but how do you see the importance of connection as we move back into society?
Yeah. Is this my last question?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to plug two things here. One's identity, the other's connection.
Yes.
So just quickly on identity. So when I wake up of a morning and think like, who am I? Because that's what I do, because I'm a weirdo. My mental model for like finding me is output, input, throughput. Output is the things that I do, input is like who I am, throughput is the connections that I cohabitate. So this is OCD thinking, by the way. 3 pillars, each has a third pillar. So output has professional, play, and creative. Input has physical, emotional, financial. Throughput has family, friends, partner. Pre-pandemic, talking like AD, BC, so pre-pandemic, of those, if you say that, now there's like 9 boxes sitting at the bottom of that pyramid. 1A got most attention from most people, as in my career is my everything. And I think what the pandemic forced is, if you have a similar mental model to me, it was like, shit, we need to put equity in a whole bunch of these other buckets, including my mental health, my physical health, my relationships, et cetera, because when the 1A is threatened, i.e. my work, my self-worth gets threatened. And if there's a high correlation between your job being threatened and your self-worth being threatened, take a big pause. That is, you're in dangerous territory. You have to define yourself more than your job. That is like putting your whole vulnerable self on the outside of you and making it susceptible to heaps of weather that you can't control. So character-based worth. Am I a good person? Do I show up well for the people around me? And this is going to bridge into connection. Way more important than work is great. I'm a workaholic, probably. I'm obsessed with mental health, and I love what I do. But I'll tell you what's not in an obituary: your Q2 results of 2017. No one's going to care. The only thing that's in an obituary was, were you a good person and the quality of your relationships. That's it. So like, we really need to think about what we're prioritizing as a society and make some changes now. Like, mental health is the biggest issue facing our world today. It takes more lives than road tolls and heart disease. It is the global warming of the health industry. And one of the most Googled terms in the last 2 years has been, what is mental health?
Binged terms, searched,
Oh, sorry,
Microsoft
Bing.
search terms.
Sorry, yeah. You'd think I was still conditioned by now.
Yeah, what's that?
So
You worked for the company.
one of those Bing terms has been. So we have to like really focus in on figuring out what matters. And if we let this opportunity of a pandemic pass by without doing an internal audit, then we've missed a big opportunity. So connection is the greatest coping tool known to man. Like research speaking, you can listen to my podcast, I've got interviews with Harvard psychiatrists who have proven there is no greater ROI or tactical lever you can pull in your mind than strength of relationships. I don't have time to get into why that's true, but just trust me. So if connection is really important, and we've been challenged with that through the pandemic, and now we're coming outside of it, the best way to get good at connecting with people is to understand your attachment style as much as you would like anything else. Like personality quizzes, very big in business. We hardly ever test people for their attachment style. It is the epicenter of every interaction you have, and it's pretty much baked in from 2 years old. It's changeable, but it's really important. Are you anxious, preoccupied? Are you dismissive, avoidant? Are you disorganized? Are you securely attached? That'll answer a lot of questions and then give you a goal to come back to the middle. And how you work on your attachment style is through boundaries. And that's what I do 24/7, 365 now. Like my charity, Heart on My Sleeve, we're the main mental health services provider to Microsoft globally, to American Express, KPMG, And we have a course called Real Conversations that teaches people how to interact sustainably and how to have the emotional intelligence to create boundaries and show up for themselves and others. So if there's one thing you can do to be a better connector, learn your attachment style, then get really good at boundaries.
Thank you so much. Conscious that we are really over time, so I'll just close out. I just want to say thank you both so much for coming and being on this journey with us as we figure out how do we make hybrid work for us in today's new world that we live in. The pandemic has definitely changed the way we look at ourselves and our lives and our loved ones, and definitely making blended life a priority. So thank you both, and thank you, B&T, for having us.
Thanks for having us.